This is China's president, Xi Jinping, who has visited 11 countries during 5 separate trips to Latin America since taking power in 2013. The visits do come with a benefit, as China's economic investment in the region has been flourishing. In a visit to Brazil, the Chinese president signed 40 trade and development agreements following the G20 meeting in November. That same month, Xi also inaugurated the China-funded Shanghai port in Peru during a week-long diplomatic tour. In 2022, China was the region's second most important trading partner after the US. However, it was the top exporter to the region's biggest economy, Brazil. But this change in influence did not happen overnight.
20 years ago, or maybe 2001, China didn't appear as the most important 15 economic partners for Brazil. US was on the top. And in 2021, again, 10 years, China was the first one already. And basically 30% of the Brazilian exports go to China.
So how did all of this happen? Experts attribute the shift to the different approaches the world's two most powerful economies have taken in the region.
Latin America has been seen for many years as backyards of US.
Using its sphere of influence, the US routinely interfered in the politics of the region's countries as well, including backing multiple coup d'etats against democratically elected governments. As revealed in the Harvard Review of Latin America, the US supported coups against elected presidents in Cuba between 1906 and 1909, in Panama in 1941, in Bolivia, Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Guatemala in 1963, in Brazil in 1964, and in Chile in 1973. The US also occupied Nicaragua between 1912 and 1933 to protect American business interests, and invaded Panama in 1989. Other cases of US interventionism in the region include assassination attempts, some of which were successful, against people who didn't align with Washington's economic interests.
If we think about 60s or 70s, when US had quite a lot of influence in Latin American internal politics, the economic interests of US came together with some political influence, sometimes even for bad, supporting dictatorship, deposing governments, democratically elected.
Following all these controversial engagements with the region over the course of many decades, Washington's policy towards Latin America went through a major change after the Cold War, resulting in what some people have dubbed indifference.
But since especially the end of the Cold War, so we start to see a more focused US policy towards Middle East.
This indifference is illustrated by the lack of US ambassadorships to some Latin American nations, with ambassadors to countries including Colombia, Bolivia, Venezuela, and the Dominican Republic still pending appointment by the US Senate, and the Bahamas having no US ambassador since 2011, as well as by the fact that President Biden waited until the end of his term in November 2024 to make his first presidential visit to the region, and did so to attend APEC and G20 meetings, not as a dedicated diplomatic trip. Furthermore, during Donald Trump's first term as president, he only visited the region once, and only went to Argentina, again for a G20 meeting. Washington's increasingly distanced approach is also accompanied by a tougher stance on immigration from the region. The US presidential campaign was marked by deportation promises, targeting irregular migrants from Latin America. During the tenures of both Biden and Trump, it remained the top issue on the country's political agenda.
So many Central American or Caribbean people that, or even South America, that migrate and try to enter illegally in US, it is a very crucial point for the relationship of Latin America with United States of America.
For now, China does not seem to have the same issues the US perpetuated with its neighbors. Beijing seems to be focused on its ambition to boost trade and investment, expanding its economic sphere of influence vis-a-vis the US. However, China's growing influence comes with its own risks, like potentially rendering the region's economy more fragile.
If we look, for instance, again, the example of Brazil, it's a huge dependence on exports to China. So those exports to China, they are not proportional to what China's imports from Brazil. So China could easily say, look, we don't want any more Brazilian products, and they would find it elsewhere in the world. But that would be really a crash for the Brazilian economy. So we create another form of economic dependence that's very dangerous for countries, especially countries that are quite dependent in a single product or a single sector.
So, will China take over economic leadership in the region based on its strategic approach?